PewDiePie, subscribe to 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 PewDiePie. Subscribe to PewDiePie, 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 subscribe to PewDiePie. Subscribe to PewDiePie, 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 subscribe to PewDiePie. Subscribe to PewDiePie, 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 subscribe to PewDiePie,
to be honest,
subscribe to PewDiePie, 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 subscribe to
I don't like
PewDiePie,
T-Series either.
subscribe to PewDiePie,
The one person I actually like is Jacksepticeye.
subscribe to PewDiePie,
Yeah, I agree with this guy. Subscribe to PewDiePie.
subscribe to PewDiePie,
Yeah, this guy's gonna keep saying subscribe to PewDiePie.
subscribe to PewDiePie,
You know what?
Subscribe to PewDiePie.
subscribe to
Just for
PewDiePie,
saying subscribe to PewDiePie,
subscribe to
I will
PewDiePie,
unsubscribe from PewDiePie.
subscribe to PewDiePie. Subscribe to PewDiePie, 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 subscribe to PewDiePie,
I won't subscribe for you. I was subscribed from 2011, but now I will unsubscribe because you're annoying.
Subscribe to PewDiePie, subscribe to PewDiePie, subscribe to
I swear
PewDiePie,
to God, I was
subscribe to
subscribed
PewDiePie,
from
subscribe to
2011 and now I will
PewDiePie, subscribe to
unsubscribe.
PewDiePie, subscribe to PewDiePie, subscribe to PewDiePie. PewDiePie.